What's up, everybody? How's it going? It's Tuesday. Let's get tactical. We're back. We're back again with the Tactical Tuesday. Feels like it's been forever because we didn't have one last week. Right? That is correct. Did we? Did we do a Tactical Tuesday last week? No, we definitely didn't. Yeah, because we streamed Invitational last week. So yeah, we're back with another episode. So we have a lot to talk about because it's been a little while since we've talked about lists, and I'm excited for it. And we actually have a lot to get over too, and I'm just going to turn my phone off so that it doesn't make noise, because I'm a professional person. I do want to apologize ahead of time. My normal microphone pooped out on me, unfortunately, and I'm back to this headset. So if things are a little scratchy, because the headset microphone's a little bit funky with the streaming software, I apologize profusely. I'll be back to my super fancy microphone hopefully tomorrow. I was supposed to get some replacement bits for it today, but it didn't show up, so it is what it is. Anyway, we're talking about some stuff. We got a lot to get over before we jump into the main meat of the show, which is talking about tournament lists, obviously. First off, I had a video go live today about this Kickstarter campaign. This is Snot Goblin Gaming's Kickstarter, and they're doing modular ruin terrain for Warhammer 40k and a variety of other games. I did a review about them, and I mean, full disclosure, they did sponsor my video about it, so not entirely, unbiased shout out here, but I do want to give them another shout out on this Tactical Tuesday, because I think it's a sweet campaign, and I also want to give them a big congratulations. They launched this morning, and they've already trebled their funding goal. So we're going to the moon, I guess, everybody. But the campaign's super cool. I actually have my copy here. They are making these, here it is, plastic ruins, and the cool part about them is that they all are snap fit. So you can assemble them and disassemble them for storage and stuff like that. They all break down to their component parts, so they're easy to store and everything. But I just want to give them a big shout out for meeting their funding goal. Big congratulations to Snot Goblin Gaming, because that's fucking awesome. Kickstarter's like wildly stressful, and the first day is like immensely important to how well a Kickstarter does. You can basically tell whether or not a Kickstarter is going to fail based on the first 24 hours or so. And given the fact that we're only a couple hours in, they've already done pretty well. I think that's pretty exciting. So, good stuff. Anyway, big shout out to them. Let's do some other shout outs. We have a new event up on the Discord server. If you want to play some competitive online 40k, we have an online GT that is starting this Friday. Registration closes Thursday, assuming that we can fill it. And so please come check it out. If you're not in the Discord server already, !Discord in the channel or in the chat, and then you can get over there. And we've got a bunch of prizes and stuff for the event. There is an entry fee, but that goes towards prize support as well as invitational prize support for the end of the season, and you get 1 billion standings points for playing in larger events like GTs. So please sign up. I'm going to be playing in this one and streaming all my games, so hopefully it'll be pretty exciting. But it's a minimum 5 rounds, could go to 6 if we get enough people, and it's 1 game per week, GT 2020 Nephilim stuff. So come in and play. I don't know. It'll be a good time. I hope you participate if you want to do that. And if you're not familiar with online 40k, then, I don't know, come into the Discord anyway, and we'll show you the ropes. Anyway, I think that's all the little housekeeping. How's everybody doing today, by the way? Hope everyone had a good weekend. Got some good games in. And, maybe some tournaments. I know there's some talk in the Discord about, in the chat about some tournaments happening. Questions about the 11 War Dogs and Abaddon list? I think it's pretty good. You aren't into the problem with that every SKU list has, where occasionally your opponent has like a hard counter to you and you just immediately die. But that's that's kind of just how knights work in general, so it's not that big of a deal. And Abaddon can shore that up a little bit. He's basically the damage output, and the survivability of a big knight. So he's kind of like a big knight, but on a small base, which is pretty nice. And he gives you your charge bonuses and your rerolls and stuff like that. So I think the list is solid. I wouldn't say I think it's like the top tier competitive list, but I certainly think you could 4-1, you could 5-0 maybe if you're really good and you get some good matchups. Yeah. anyway. I did play a game this weekend, or a tournament this weekend, by the way. And we could talk about those games real quick. If I run my thing over, here it is. What's up, everybody? Here's my list. Oh, it's so small. Let's see if I can fix that. Become bigger, please. Window. Thank you. That's much bigger. Thank you. I don't want to like offend anybody, but it wasn't like the most interesting tournament that I've ever played in. I think a lot of it was we played player place terrain, and I don't know. I guess we could kind of showcase some of the downfalls of player place terrain, I guess. But I played the venue I was going to. I played before, and I ran into some issues with the terrain. I think I've talked about it on a previous Tactical Tuesday. So I usually run a Kraken list. I decided to bring Leviathan this time because I did play in an event at the same location that was using the terrain layouts that this particular tournament was using, and I got a one map layout with basically no coverage on it. So I was like, well, we're just gonna take like basically the tankiest army that we can and see how that goes. It turns out last minute they changed to player place terrain, which I was like, oh, I'm not sure what I would rather have, like bad pre-layout terrain or like awkward player place terrain, and we got the second one. So I ended up running Leviathan, basically just warrior spam. I had I had 4 units of warriors, 2 units of 6, 1 unit of 9, and a unit of 4 just to fill out the remainder. I put 1 in a Tyrannocyte so we could turn 1, drop it, and basically be a big distraction card effect from the 9-man unit, and then the 9-man unit sits in the middle of the table. Banner's the center objective or whatever's sitting in the middle, and just like tanks for the entire game until the game's over. It's kind of a roll your face in the keyboard kind of list, which I didn't love. But turns out it works really well for the terrain format, so I don't know. I did stick with my double Zoanthropes. I've really been liking them, and I did take double Neurothrope as well. Downside is that in order to fill out the points, I had to cut my forward deploy, so I was like crossing my fingers we didn't hit Recover the Relics. And part of the arithmetic there is that the last event I played at the same store, we'd played Recover the Relics. I was like, oh, they probably won't roll Recover the Relics a second time. They did in round 1, and I got a round 1 bye, so I got to skip it, which is, I don't know, they're serendipitous in the extreme, I guess. But there is enough points to switch one of the Neurothropes to a Broodlord, which I'll probably do in the future, just to have forward deploy. So if you hit Recover the Relics, you don't lose on 2 CP, which is really bad. But in my first game, we played Abandoned Sanctuary, so I was even like sort of more happy that I took all the forward deploy out of my list because that way I wouldn't have gotten it in that matchup. I was up against the Ynnari list, and essentially what I was able to do was because I won the attacker defender role, I put this kind of opaque ruin that didn't have any windows on it, such that it could control the center objective without being in line of sight. So I basically just put the 9-man brick of warriors inside here. There was very little my opponent could do to attack it, and they just like got to sit there the entire game and look at my opponent kind of angrily, except not because they couldn't draw line of sight. So my opponent was playing, it was an interesting Ynnari list. He had the Incarn, obviously, and then a bunch of little trading combat units, as well as 1 unit of D cannons. A bunch of Psychers. He had a Shadowseer, double Farseer. Oh no, it was a Shadowseer, Farseer, Warlock Skyrunner, Warlock Conclave, and a Hemlock Wraithfighter. So it was like 6 Psyker units. It was kind of wild. I still took Psychic Interrogation, though, because I'm a madman. And my opponent had Behareth as well, who I know he always has to come forward to do objective things, and then you get to interrogate him. I played pretty far forward with my Zoanthropes and my Neurothropes. I had my Resonance Barb Neurothrope kind of out in the front here. And he basically just pushed really far forward and took a bunch of shooting and then rerolled 3+ vulnerable saves and didn't die because he's like High Fleet Leviathan. My opponent kind of jumped in with he had a Falcon with Howling Banshees in it. They charged into the big unit in the middle and tried to do some damage, but they couldn't, and then they all died. 5 Howling Banshees, and I had CP floating for the -1 damage strat, so the Mirror Swords lady didn't like do too much. It's not a great matchup for 9 warriors. So I lost a couple warriors there, but then they kind of pushed out and started killing everything. I dropped my drop pod down with another warrior unit. They made a charge into a building because of the 2-inch engagement rule, so that's only a 7-inch charge out of Deep Strike. Because I had Augmented Ferocity for +1, charge, and everything kind of rolled over from there. I also got a little lucky. I mean, my opponent put a lot of shooting into them. Neurothropes, and this little guy back here survived for like 2 basically full rounds of shooting. My opponent had a Void Raven bomber, you can kind of see off screen, that bombed the center of my deployment zone and hit 4 or 5 units and did 2 mortal wounds, which was unlucky for him. Although I had called the Neurothrope Imperative, he went first, so the bomber was kind of obvious. So I called Neurothrope Imperative that turn to block the mortal wounds from the bomb, but it didn't really matter because he rolled garbage. So we got a little lucky. But overall, like having, you know, I have this like 1 Tyrant Guard that my opponent can't shoot at because he's holding this objective, because I was able to put a terrain covering the 3-inch aura of the objective marker. What do you do against that? I don't know. It's player plays terrain, whatever. And eventually my opponent ran out of stuff. The Hive Tyrant jumped it back and forth, killing everyone. And that was a pretty good one. So we were 2-0 at that point because I had a round 1 bye. And then we went into the finals game against Obsec Necrons. And I played against Nate, who's, I wouldn't say necessarily local, but in sort of the local community. Super fun player to play against. And we played at a tournament last month as well, actually, in the final game. So it was good to have a rematch. In this case, though, he was playing Obsec Necrons. He had double Catan, Silent King. He had a Void Dragon and a Nightbringer. Double Scorpic Destroyers, a big unit of Wraiths, a bunch of Scarabs. And we were on Secure Missing Artifacts, so 5 objectives, and they move at the start of the game, which allows the Necron player to kind of do funky stuff to make their Treasures of Eons and Awaken Ancient Machineries secondaries really easy. So basically I knew that the whole game plan against Necrons is just to like put pedal to the metal, never let off, and try to kill their whole army before they outscore you on secondaries. So that's what we did. I ended up going first. My opponent won the roll to place terrain first, so he was able to place his terrain overlapping the center aura there, so it was able to hold it from out of line of sight. My guy, I then placed terrain as close as I could to it, but enough so that I could put my guys in my deployment zone and they couldn't be seen past the terrain. I ended up going first. My dudes ran out with Onslaught. We got a Shard Lure on a unit. He actually pre-game moved into the Ruin, which I thought was a little aggressive. I was able to drop my Drop Pod squad in to get a shot onto his Canoptic Wraiths, trigger a Shard Lure so that this unit could charge in. For a turn 1 charge onto them. It needed a 9, but with the Shard Lure, it's like it's an 8 on the dice because of the +1 to charge, and then with the Shard Lure, it's roll 3d6, drop the lowest. So it's actually pretty reasonable charge, but I think I had to do it regardless. And they went in, they burned the entire Wraith unit down, they killed some random idiots, and then overran back. And my opponent basically sunk a bunch of stuff into them. It took them way too long to die, and then I was able to slowly kill the rest of his army. This drop was a little bit aggressive, I think. It was mostly so that I could get another activation of Shard Lure, but it also meant that they got picked up by Scorpic Destroyers down there. Although the Scorpic Destroyers did trade at that point. They weren't Chronometron, so the Hive Tyrant came in and blew them up and ran away. But for the most part, this Ruin placement's stupid. Player place terrain is like a blight. It's so dumb. And I don't like it. I think that it gives too much control to players to place terrain perfectly for themselves. And it makes the games like less competitive rather than more. So I don't know. That was my tournament. I ended up winning this final game. I tabled my opponent, except for, I think, 3 Scarab Swarms at the end. And maybe one of his characters was alive. And I had a couple things left. I had the Hive Tyrant and the Tyrant Guard left. 1 unit of Zones, I think, had survived. And my characters. And that was it. All the warriors were dead. The Trotbot was dead. Mostly everything was dead. We kind of mutually annihilated. But I was able to get up a little bit on primary. I was able to shut out some of his secondary scoring in the bottom turns, but I ended up only winning by 5 points because Necrons are so good at scoring. But I think that's how you have to play against Necrons. You just gotta kill them. You just have to kill their whole army and hope that they don't have enough beef to kill you back, basically. And it's tough, but it's doable. So anyway, you know, there it is. Where can one find good terrain placement rules? Any recommendations? I think the one that people usually use are the LVO, or the Frontline Gaming rules, which the Frontline Gaming events that use player place terrain. utilize, which I believe this event used. The layouts weren't identical because I think the LVO player place terrain layouts have asymmetric loadouts on each side, but these ones were symmetric and they were just based on basically what was on hand, I think. But you basically can only place terrain on your own side of the table, which is kind of, I think, the lesser of two evils, because if you let people place terrain on both sides of the table, then it becomes this like really, like, I think the pregame's more interesting, but it also has more of a potential to just bone you if terrain doesn't get placed correctly. If your opponent like is able to place first and denies your best position, then if they have range superiority, they can just shoot you off the table really easily before you get to objectives. So I think, I don't know. I think player place terrain is bad in general, which is unfortunate. And in this case, I think it worked out for me ridiculously well. There was one turn in this where because my opponent was hiding scarabs behind a wall, I couldn't like interact with his objective. But being able to place Leviathan warriors in range of a center objective so they can turn one charge without being shot at turn one is like wild. It's just too good, I think. Like the reason I was playing High Fleet Kraken was because in most terrain layouts it takes 2 turns for Leviathan warriors to break cover and then get into contact with the enemy, and Kraken warriors can do it in 1 turn because they have their big advanced strat. But if you're allowed to just put terrain at the front of your deployment zone, then there's no downside. The warriors just get to play in the sprinkler. You know, it is what it is. So that was my event this weekend. I had a fun time. My games were really fun. My opponents are great. And I don't want to throw any shade or anything. I just think that player place terrain, no good. But otherwise, I don't know. It was a good weekend. It was fun. It's nice to go 3-0. But let's talk about some other stuff now. Let's talk about some friggin' tournament lists, chat. Maybe that did or did not use player place terrain. I don't know. We'll find out, maybe. I don't have any stats for this week because it doesn't look like the stats page has been updated through this week. But we can talk about some interesting lists from the last 2 weeks of gameplay because we didn't talk about anything from the end of July. We actually haven't talked about anything for a while because I believe the week before last we talked about invitational lists. Oh no, that was 2 weeks ago. So we covered the weekend of the 22nd, 23rd, but we haven't covered the weekend of the 30th or this past weekend. So let's start doing that, chat. Let's get in there. Did I say I put warriors in a Tyrannocyte? I did put warriors in a Tyrannocyte. I did. 6 of them. 6 warriors. It's pretty good. I don't know. Pretty all right. So I think there's some interesting ones. North and South GT is a pretty interesting one. This one is from Australia, so we have some classic Australian chicanery going on. But we have Matt Morris-Hurley and Adam Camilleri topping that one. I think most interestingly with Grey Knights, not that Grey Knights are particularly bad, but the fact that they've been falling off the wagon since the Nephilim update. So it is nice to see them come back, and I think it's a pretty interesting list in that it has a bunch of paladins in it. But for the most part, Grey Knight lists mostly look kind of the same. I guess the most interesting thing about Adam Camilleri's list here is that he's not running a Nemesis Grandmaster. He's just running Drago and a Labi, and then the Paladin bricks. So I guess if you're playing 5 objective missions and you just want to dominate a center objective with paladins and continue to complete your rituals, then paladins seem like a pretty good option. We have double interceptor squads, 1 rhino to deliver a unit. The rhino in Green Knights is pretty cool because you can put the interceptors in it, unlike assault marines from Space Marines. So you actually get kind of a bonus threat range out of it because they can drop 3 inches out. Yeah, no, eat bolt guns in the soundboard on YouTube, chat. One of the reasons we like Twitch streaming is because we can play soundboards. But I appreciate the Danny and chat. I appreciate the solidarity, throwing the eat bolt guns up in there. Can I look at your list and give you suggestions, Bryce? Yeah, usually we do list reviews if you drop a super chat. Do list reviews for a super chat. That seems fine. So it's mostly all infantry Grey Knights, which is pretty cool, but it is nice to see Grey Knights sort of back at the top level. We do see some good finishes out of Adeptus Custodes this weekend as well. Although I think, to be fair, this is a little bit, or over the last 2 weeks, I should say, but I think, to be fair, it's probably a little bit of an outlier. I'm not sure that Adeptus Custodes are really super competitive, but we did see Idrin Yogaswaran, excuse me, with the Shadowkeepers list, which I think is pretty good if you have a lot of Heretic Astartes in your metagame, because Shadowkeepers are so strong against melee that they actually can play the melee game against Heretic Astartes. It's not amazing, but it is certainly playable. And we did see that matchup happen in the Invitational as well. We saw big Custodian Shield Guard squads up into a bunch of Possessed, which is it's certainly an interesting matchup. And I think the Adeptus Custodes in that matchup got run over, but there was some funkiness there that happened for sure. Are people running 2 Hive Tyrants nowadays, or just one? Usually just one. I think most of the time it's a single Flyrant, although I've seen some double lists. There's one with a there's one with a Shard Gullet, and then the other one has a Winged Hive Tyrant. That happens occasionally. So this one's interesting because it's a triple Virtus Praetors alongside the Custodian Shield Guard squads, which is pretty cool. And then we also saw Keenan Elliott with a 5-1. This took first. This was at Mork's Maritime Open. I did hear some. There were some complaints about the terrain, I think, on this event, at least according to community members. So I don't know. Take that with a grain of salt. But we can also see that there's an Astro Militarum in second place here that we'll talk about, which speaks to me that maybe there was a little bit, some open lines of sight for sure. But this is a little bit more focused on the vehicles. So we have 1 Caladius Grav Tank, double Contemptor, 1 Achilles, 1 Galatus, 2 Armiger Helverins, and the rest is Custodian Shield Guard squads, 3 mans. And this is in Emperor's Chosen instead of Shadowkeepers, which makes sense for the kind of MSU variety. But it is nice to see the Super Heavy Auxiliary coming back in a little bit. Unfortunately, you don't get the Super Heavy Auxiliary, the freebie, because it's not a Custodes Super Heavy Auxiliary. And that's the downside. We saw at the tail end of Nockmoon, there was a Grey Knights list that also took the double or triple Armiger Helverins. And that was pretty effective. And it's a little bit awkward to do in Nephilim because you start with so few command points. But with Trajan Valoris refunding you a bunch of command points, it is cool to see that one come back into the fore a little bit. Do you do an HTML doc to send me the list? A paste bin probably works best. HTML is fine, but I think paste bin's the best. You can just message me on Discord if you want to do that, if you're in the Discord. That's probably the best way to go. All right, so we talked about some Adeptus Custodes, which was cool to see. There were some other... over the last couple weeks, there were some other good ones that came out. We do have a TacticalTortoise community member, Iron Hands Extraordinaire Fucini, Nassim, coming out with a 5-0 with Iron Hands. And if you actually, the funny thing is that if you look through the sub-faction win rates for this week in particular, this July, the weekend of July 30th, Iron Hands is actually dramatically the best sub-faction played because it has such a low play rate, but we do have 1 5-0 with it. And so it has like an 80% win rate, I think, because we did have that 5-0. And I think there was an X and 1 somewhere in here with Iron Hands. And that's just so funny. I think it's very appropriate, though, because... I mean, this might be a hot take, and I'm actually going to be bringing some guest interviewees back onto the the stream going on into the future. And I actually have Fushini coming in next week to talk about his Iron Hands list and to talk about the state of Space Marines. But I think it's, in my opinion, Iron Hands are certainly the best Space Marine chapter. They have consistent secondaries. Their damage output is the best. They have the best like swath of stratagems that can cross the largest breadth of factions. Their threat range isn't great, but as long as they can bring their shooting to bear, that's not that big of a deal. And their dev drops are so strong. This double Devastator drop pod on turn 1 that oftentimes they don't really need to be shooting that hard because they can sort of get you out of your rabbit hole by dealing so much damage in the first turn with that dev drop. It's so crazy. Not list related, but do I have any tips or useful knowledge for playing more tabletop simulator games than IRL games? So, Henry, are you asking about tips to play tabletop simulator, or like? I'm not. Yeah, I guess I don't know. TTS is great. Use Yellow Scribe a lot. Keep Wahapedia open with you so you can look at all the rules. The game is basically the same on both clients, so I don't if there was there's not like any particular tricks, I guess, for playing on TTS that are different. Drukari 5-0? Yeah, there was a Drukari 5-0 chat. Drukari actually is not a stranger to 5-0 or X-1 right now, but it was the kind of rack. I guess not quite a rack spam, but it is bringing a ton of grotesque, a ton of racks. It's not Army of Renown, right? Yeah, it's just a real space raid, which is interesting. But yeah, I don't know. It's mostly a Drukari list. I think Drukari are slowly coming back in. Their secondaries are still relatively strong. And as the top echelon of the meta gets knocked down a little bit, I think Drukari is like slowly sort of creeping back in. But yeah, they occasionally go X and go 5-0 pretty well. So I'm going to take a look at the list here, chat. Oh, there is the list. All right. Nice. We got it. All right, so moving on from Iron Hands, some other interesting lists we saw. And I think it's pretty interesting. We did see this Tempest of War the Grand Tournament, all Heretic Astartes, top 3. I don't know what's up with that, but there you go. We did see a pretty wide open, like, top 5 breakdown where it's the same armies repeating, but this has kind of been the trend for GT Nephilim, where it ends up being a pretty open or a pretty diverse top X, where we have some Space Marines, some Imperial Knights, Black Legion.
List sent, thanks, Trev.
Nice. All right, sick. Yeah, we'll take a look at the lists right after. As well as Drukari's, there's a 5-0 Drukari, and we have a 4-1. But there's not a ton of repeat factions, right? Like we have this. This is a little bit of a outlier, and also I don't know how the Tempest of War like metagame works. If there is a faction that's favored in Tempest of War, maybe Heretic Astartes. I don't know, but there's not a lot this domination that we saw previously, which I think is pretty nice to see. All right, so before we move on, we'll talk about Bryce's list. So this is the full list breakdown. So we're running. Is it standard Leviathan? The full Battlescar breakdown is a little bit tough to read through. I guess we're not adapting out of the reroll, it looks like. And then it is, what's the detachment? A battalion, a single battalion. This is a Foot Hive Tyrant with Shard Gullet. All right, fair enough. And then the Warlord trait is Direct Guidance. Good old classic support tyrant. I love him. One Neurothrope and one Tyrannid Prime. Neurothrope with no upgrades, is that right? That's a little bit interesting. I think your like main caster is probably always Resonance Barb. So I would consider that. Just even if he's not like doing actions or something, just the fact that it makes your onslaughts like automatic, almost automatic. You have to roll like basically triple ones to fail, or I guess some combination of all ones and a single two on your Warp Siphon is good. And if you have the CP for it, then, which it looks like you start with 4, then I would also put Synaptic Tendrils on him, because the Tyrant is oftentimes who you're going to be doing warp or like Psychic Interrogation with. So getting the additional roll 3, drop the lowest to just get around denies and try to get the CP back from that secondary, I think is really strong. So that's what I would do, I think. 4 CP is like, it's kind of a lot. You don't necessarily need that many CP. 2 is like the sweet spot, I think, for Tyranids. 3 feels good, but I think you give up a lot. And then the Prime is just a Venom Cannon guy with Bone Swords. He's Adrenal Glands. Could take or leave the Adrenal Glands. He doesn't really get into melee that often in my experience. I like to put, this is kind of personal preference, but I like to put the direct guidance on the Prime, because the Prime's always in a good space to use it. Whereas the Hive Tyrant, sometimes you find that the Hive Tyrant has to like jump around too far in order to make things happen. You end up losing your direct guidance. Plus the Hive Tyrant, like everyone's focus firing the Hive Tyrant. If you lose him, it's super bad. And if he's your direct guidance caddy, then if you lose him and you lose your imperatives and the direct guidance, it gets really awkward. Whereas if you just lose the Tyrant and the imperatives go away, it's, you know, a little bit sad. Waggly Jack with the resub. Thank you. I guess we don't have a text-to-speech on the subscription or the membership updates. But how do I think the Demon Book will do in the game? I think it's certainly going to be a meta shakeup for sure. Basically requiring you to interact with it in melee, or if the defensive abilities are strong enough, forcing people into like high volume, low AP shooting is going to be like hugely different, because everyone is stacking AP to beat Armor of Contempt right now. So like, you know, you see these Towlists and they're just putting like plasma rifles on plasma rifles on plasma rifles and stuff. Whereas if like basically the only way you have to beat these guys, if you're shooting single plasma rifle shots at them and they're just saving on a 4 or a 3, like who cares? So people are, I think there's going to be a switch back to those higher volume attacks if the Doom Book is really strong. So I think it's certainly going to be a shakeup. I think it's going to be powerful. Based on the trend, at the very least, it's going to be like upper mid tier. That's been the lowest rate, I guess, of 9th edition codexes, besides like Gene's Taylor Cult, has been very strong. But obviously there is the opportunity for it to be broken too. But we'll see. We'll have to see how more mechanics go. I'm kind of excited to see the Greater Demon rolls, though. I think the Greater Demons... I hope Greater Demons are good, because they've been so bad for so long that I would love to see them be great. All right, and then so troops. We have double, triple Hormigans, quadruple Hormigans. Hot damn. I think that's maybe too many Hormigans. And then is this a 6? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, it's a 9. Is it 2 9s? Triple Venom Cannons, Adrenal? Yes. Very nice. Very good. And then this is the same, so it's double 9s. You could probably... I think it's personal preference, but I think I appreciate 6s more than 9s. So you could, like... You'd have to free space for 3 more warriors, right? So I think you cut, like, 1 Hormigant unit, maybe 2. And you can cut a 9 to 2 6s. And I think I like that better, because the 9 is like where you kind of stack all your buffs, and then they tank a bunch and then they're dead, and that's like whatever. But this, like, the 6s are there to trade. So if they spend all their time shooting at the 9, you can kill them with the 6s. Whereas if you have 2 9s, it's like pretty ponderous, because you don't have like very much flexibility of where you're going to go. And if they neutralize a 9, then you lose the entire, like, you lose the whole 9. Whereas if you have 2 6s, then it takes twice as long to actually get rid of the threat, because even just a couple warriors making it to your opponent is pretty dangerous usually. Like I said, I think it's personal preference, though. I don't know if you need all these Hormigans, to be fair. Especially since you don't Like, you don't want to lock in the pregame move for Hormagaunts. And they're good at, like, taking table space. But I don't know if you necessarily need that. You're already kind of an unstoppable force with, like, the Leviathan Warrior bricks. And so, like, also disrupting your opponent feels, like, kind of unnecessary. We have the Tyrant Guard, which is good. Zone Throps, which is good. Oh, you definitely want Venom Throps in there. Yeah, I would free some space for Venom Throps for sure. Especially with the 9-man bricks, just giving them the hit penalty is like such a huge deal. And then you can also defend against melee attacks, which is really good. And then 1 Exocrine, 1 Tyrannofex. I'm not sold on the Exocrine right now. I think it's too expensive. And I think what you're going to run into is that you're not, like, threatening your opponent at all in the beginning. Like, you're going to engage them with Hormagaunts, right? The Hormagaunts are going to run across the table and contest your objectives, and your opponent's going to kill them. But Hormagaunts die to, like, random stuff. Your opponent isn't, like, trying to kill Hormagaunts, which means that all of their actual shooting can go into the Warrior Bricks and start killing them. So I think what I would like to see instead of maybe the Exocrine, I think the Tyrannofex is, like, is pretty all right. I don't know if I would go out of my way to play one, but I think they're fine. And if you play on relatively light terrain or you're playing against, like, a bunch of super heavies, they're really good. But I think I would like to see instead of the Exocrine is, like, a single Harpy, because then you have something that can push really far forward. You can, like, keep the Synaptic Enhancement. If you give it Stranglethorns, you actually save a bunch of points that you could take more warriors with, or the Venom Thropes. And then it's, like, enough of a threat that your opponent has to deal with it. And so you can play it aggressively. It takes a bunch of shooting. It takes most of a shooting phase to kill it because it's transhuman, and usually, like, first turn it's invulnerable saved. And that lets you eat table space with the Tyranid Warriors. Like, the big thing is that the Warriors typically will take 2 to 3 turns to get to your opponent. So you want to have things in your army that just distract your opponent from shooting at the Warriors. Like, literal distraction card effects is basically. That's why Harpies are really good in Tyranids. It's not just because, like, they're very efficient shooting platforms, which they are, but they're also super. I just realized that this is, like, kind of off the thing. Okay, I don't know why this is broken off. I apologize that you can't read half of the data sheets, chat. It's kind of annoying. Oh well. I guess we can just do this. There we go. It'll be a little ugly for a bit, but whatever. So yeah, so basically the name of the game is, like, just distracting your opponent from shooting your Tyranid Warriors until they can get there. The Tyranid Warriors are generally where the damage output of, like, the Tyranid list come from. And if you're not playing Kraken and are super fast, then you need the ability to, like, make sure your opponent doesn't just put all their shooting into them and kill them. Because the Tyranid Warriors will die. They're very difficult to kill, but they're not impossible. And if an entire army shoots at a unit of 9, they'll just go away. So you need to threat overload your opponent. Playing Highfalutin Leviathan is all about threat overload. Effectively. And if you have, like, these 2 big do-nothing idiots who are, like, sitting in the back and not threatening your opponent until they move out to shoot, your opponent's not really going to do anything. So I would cut one of the 2. I would probably pick your favorite. The Exocrine's got a wider variety of good matchups, but also the Tyrannofex is probably more efficient, just from a damage output standpoint, because the Exocrine's a little expensive right now. Plus, if you're keeping the Leviathan reroll, the Tyrannofex is nice. That's another reason to split to 6s as well, is the Leviathan reroll goes farther on the warrior squads. So those would be my changes. I would probably cut a couple of Hormagaunts for Venom Thropes. I'd probably split a 9-man into 2 6-mans, and I would probably cut one of the big monsters for something that is fast. Like, you can do and this came out of a discussion with Headstrong, who's another community member who I played in stream a while ago, and he was playing Harpies and mentioned something about taking the warriors in the drop pod to act as that big sort of force projection piece instead of the Harpies, because it's more consistent. You don't get boned if you go second and your opponent has railguns or something. And I started playing it and I really liked it. It's just like more fun than Harpies, I think. So that's also another option. It's just a drop and pod some stuff down. It's all, there's lots of good, interesting stuff. I guess no Winged Hive Tyrant's a little bit sad, but that's personal preference, I guess. I think the Winged Hive Tyrant is more powerful, but if you really like Shard Gullet, you can play it. It's a little bit... There is a little bit of anti-synergy between the Tyrant effects and the Hive Tyrant, though, because their damage output's really similar, and their like position on the table is going to be pretty similar. So if your opponent just has a big thing to hide behind, they're just going to hide from you, and both of those units aren't doing anything, whereas the Winged Hive Tyrant is going, it's going to be jumping around. But I mean, that's up to you. But the big things are that I think you want Venom Thropes for sure. You want something that's fast for sure. And you probably wanted a Resonance Barb on your Neurothrope. Some upgrades in the Neurothrope for sure. All right. Hope that all makes sense. Anyway, you can keep talking about lists now, chat. Turn my crop back on. Boop. All right, where were we at? Going through last weekend. So I know somebody was pointing out that there were some Dark Angels seems in play, which I know is very exciting. We have a 5-0 at Dark Angels from Sunken City Slugfest. This is a pretty sweet top 4, by the way, right? We got an AdMech top 4, which they've been doing very poorly. It's a Styges AdMech with Breachers. Is it an Army of Renown? No. It's got the big Breacher brick. Does it have the... Who's it? Janitor as the upgrade that buffs the Breachers? I guess not. Double Castellan robots with Flamers. 2 Anja Dune Crawlers, Archaeopter Fusilov, 2 individual Iron Strider Ballistari, Tyraxi Skystalkers, 2 Sicarian units, 2 Ranger units. Yeah, this is like a really kind of MSU style, which I really kind of like. Archaeopter Fusilov is still strong, for sure. The bombing is like really, really super good. And I think you play it a little bit more defensively now because they're so expensive. And with the Chaff Launcher, it is hard to kill. But the fact that you can just bomb and then run it off the table, that's been a strategy that people have been playing with more and more. And you don't necessarily need to use the shooting, especially as like shooting at people in cover. Usually the high volume, like AP0, 1 damage doesn't really do too much. So you just bomb and then you run off the table and you come back in, you shoot, and then you bomb and you run off the table. Pretty good. This is a really interesting list, actually. Is it you that finds it kind of greasy playing Leviathan, Hive Center, Chameleon, Wounded on 4s, Lookout Sword with Guard? You can have Shard Gullet, being able to heal him? Yeah, I mean, like, most of those things are unnecessary, right? The Hive Tyrant should never be attacked. Like, you know, the fact that it has a bunch of defensive abilities, you can already transhuman a Hive Tyrant just in the Codex generically. So the fact that it's in like High Fleet Leviathan is fine. It's like whatever. It should never be taking damage before it's dead. So the ability to heal it's like whatever. And you can do that to any of the monsters. So I like the overlapping defensive effects are kind of anti-synergistic for Hive Tyrants, to be fair, because the Hive Tyrants are so defensive. They should be played so defensively that they basically are never in danger anyway until they're dead. So like Hive Tyrants, in my experience, unless some wild dice happen, which certainly happens, especially with Transhuman and 4+ Invuln save. Like there's a lot of failure points in killing that guy, but more often than not, Hive Tyrants exist in 2 modes of being. Either they are shooting you or meleeing you while being untargetable, or they're dead. And sometimes both in the same in one game. So I think it's whatever. I don't think the Hive Tyrant is the most broken thing in the Leviathan list. I think it might be the most broken thing in the Codex in general, but Leviathan doesn't make it any worse. We wanted to take a look at the Dark Angels list. Yeah, that's one above here. Jeffrey Keister. It's an unfortunate last name. I guess I'm sure that guy had a really good middle school. Playing Azrael and Ezekiel. Classic combination. Azrael for the Invuln save. Ezekiel is just a very good librarian. He's just like the best librarian. He's +1 to cast his own psychic powers, his discipline psychic powers, which is nice. And giving you an additional deny against psychic interrogation is pretty good. You can also already be, if we have watched somewhere, you can be kind of defensive against the It doesn't look like we do. Against the Psychic secondaries, and especially because you can have Watchers in the Dark if you have Deathwing squads, which we also don't. All right, well, just kidding. Don't listen to me, I guess. All of the defensive tech, it doesn't matter. Interrogator, Chaplain, Terminator armor, the Catechism of Fire, Litany of Faith for the 5+ against mortal wounds. Master of Sanctity. So we're really shooting this game. The Centurion Assault Squad. That's an interesting play, also. Is there, like, I wonder what the synergy there is. Oh, I guess it's that Ezekiel gives it the buff because they're infantry, right? So they're just 1+ armor, 4+ invuln from Azrael. I think that's gonna be the name of the game. Although not being core keyworded means they don't benefit from like most of the synergies, which is a little bit awkward. Although a lot of times it's fine. I was looking at a Salamander's list recently, and I was pretty sure that Centurion Assault Squads, despite the fact that a lot of the synergies don't work with them, are still the way to go. Yeah, Azrael's in. So Azrael doesn't affect them with his rerolls, but his invuln save is just infantry. Yeah, so it will work on them. So there's a big brick of idiots. There is one Deathwing squad, a Ravenwing Apothecary, Eradicator squad. So that's what Ezekiel is going to be pointing at for the most part, and a Hellblaster squad for weapons from the Dark Ages. Sick. I do like. I think the Dark Angels are probably the one place where I would play a Hellblaster squad, I think. Like, maybe Salamanders, where you can Crucible battle them and they win on 2s. But also having the invulnerable save from Azrael is a big deal there. This is kind of a classic list, actually. Like, there were lists at the start of 8th edition that looked a lot like this that I remember seeing. And this is very much the same thing. So it's going to create this, like, huge brick. You have these Hellblasters and the Eradicators standing next to Azrael, so he's giving them rerolls and he's making them more difficult to kill. They're protected by Centurions. They're going to stand in the middle of the table. Everything's going to get revived by the Apothecary. Most of it is transhumanable. The Deathwing Knights, if they're your frontline, they're perma-transhuman, and the Hellblasters and Eradicators can both be transhumans with the strat. And then it's all in a 4+ invulnerable save getting healed. So it's a little slow for my liking, I think. But you can drop the Deathwing Knights in. You can 1 CP for Inspiring Oratory to give them +2 to charge, and they'd probably get into a... It's like a 6-inch charge into a building out of Deep Strike. So the Deathwing Knights can give you a little bit of reach if you need it. But otherwise, you're just going to try to take the middle objective, shoot everything in the middle that's going to threaten you, and then just like hope that your opponent can't kill 5 Centurions before the game's over. Which most opponents can't, turns out. Get rid of the bots. Yeah, eat bolt gun bots. Get out of here. Yeah, I think Ravenwing is actually I think maybe a little bit more popular right now. I know Deathwing is kind of the classic competitive Dark Angels variety, but Ravenwing has really been making a comeback in the last little while. Mostly, I just think for the fact that their secondaries are so strong that despite the fact that the army's pretty not very resilient, like it dies very quickly, you can kind of play a Necron game plan where you just push through the secondaries as quickly as you can before your whole army dies. I played against it the other day. Animander played it against me. I was playing Tau. I made some really big mistakes. It was a very embarrassing game, but he really showed me that the list is very strong. Especially, Ravenwing Black Knights, now that they have their melee weapon for free, so they're actually pretty good at fighting in melee. They're not amazing, but they're okay. And the army as a whole does so much damage because you have these Storm Speeders that are just these concentrated packets of D6 damage. The Black Knights can fire their 2 damage gunshots, and there's a lot of it. They can kind of put it wherever they want, and Dark Talons are just, like, sort of insane. They just do 3 mortal wounds every time they wound you with their gun, which is kind of a lot. So they'll shoot you with blast and just like plow you for 9 or whatever, which is like a ton of damage. And the fact that it can kind of just go wherever it wants to means that it's very difficult to hide from, and it scores Death on the Wind like ridiculously quickly. So those are the lists I typically see. This list is, like I said, this is a classic version of a list. This is a Green Wing list, which you never really see. But also the Deathwing lists are still strong. They're totally fine. Brenton playing some Tau. Double Hammerhead, double Sun Shark. Is it Tau Sept? It is Tau Sept with 2 Crisis Battlesuit units, 5 Crisis Battlesuits apiece. So we're only bringing 1 Commander plus Shadow Sun, but the Sunshark bombers are really strong. The Hammerhead gunships are interesting. I was having a conversation with a local Tau player over the course of the weekend, and asking about how he felt about, different terrain layouts. And he was saying that the terrain we were playing at the time I talked about earlier, it was player placed, but it was relatively light, and he was playing a bunch of Hammerheads and unfortunately kind of got boned by it. So the issue was that not that it was light so that he could shoot his opponent. It was light enough that they could shoot back at him. And the problem with a lot of Tau units, and Hammerheads especially, is that they're very, very fragile. And what that actually creates is this weird situation where Tau are actually benefited from more terrain being on the table, because that means that their larger units can survive longer until Kauyon turns on. And then as soon as Kauyon turns on, like round 5 Kauyon, the damage output of a Hammerhead gunship literally doubles, which is... This is wild. Like, this thing already shoots for 11 damage when it converts. And it goes to doubling if you can get it to survive to the final round of the game. So that was an interesting point, I think, where like you can play Tau very cagey, especially now that Stranglehold isn't in the format anymore. So there's no incentive for people to move out on the table. And if you move out against the Tau army and you like take the center objective and you're like, I'm going to hold this and beat you on primaries, they're just going to kill you and strike and fade away. And if that continues for the entirety of the game, once they get to round 4 or round 5 and Kauyon turns on, they just kill your army and then they win on secondaries. So unless you can beat them on secondaries, as long as their army can survive to the end, they win. Which is, like, way different than you'd expect Tau to play, right? You'd expect, like, back in the day, it was like homing beacon alpha strikes and, crisis battlesuits with 1 billion inches of movement, like, running at you. And breacher teams coming out. But now it's like this very cagey game plan, and it's very consistent if you can get it to work. But again, it requires terrain heavy enough that the Tau player doesn't die to shooting. Which is so weird. Like, why is the Tau losing a shooting matchup? But if they go second and they can't hide, they're just dead. Their army is just dead. We have this event right here. I'm going to talk about mostly because I'm unbiased and it's a local event to me. Unfortunately, this was invitational weekend. Otherwise, I would have tried to stream this event because it's within driving distance for me. But I was streaming invitational that weekend. It was won by Ramses Al-Qaid, who is a very strong local player who's actually had on stream. He's from Long Dog Wargaming, and we've had him on stream in the studio in the past. But he was stuck with Hail of Doom, actually, which is pretty nice to see. And it's just a bunch of trading units. Double Howling Banshees, Striking Scorpions, Triple Dire Avengers, Shining Spears, Wind Riders. I guess if you're locked to a single Fire and Fade over the course of the game, it doesn't really matter if all your guys die. You're like, it's fine, we'll just take more units, because if they die, who cares? And that was X1 by another Dark Angels list. This is another local player, Paul, and I know he loves to play Deathwing, so this is... gonna be a Deathwing list. Yeah, here we go. Azrael, Interrogator Chaplain. This guy has a jump pack, so he can jump around and do a Canticle of Hate wherever he needs to. And then 1 Ancient with the -1 damage pennant, I think. Yeah. 10 Deathwing Knights, big Deathwing Terminator Squad, second big Deathwing Terminator Squad, at last a Relic Terminator Squad. And I've actually streamed Paul at Webway GT a couple weeks ago. You can find that, all the games over there are on the replay channel, youtube.com/TacticalTortoisetv. That's for all the Twitch VODs go, and we have a couple games with Paul on there. Super good Deathwing player. But I think this is the classic list you expect to see when Dark Angels are at the top, right? Is like the Deathwing Terminator bricks, and then you just like cross your fingers and hope you get secondaries, and then run across the table. I think that's fair. It's a little bit scary now, though, because I think they get caught in the crossfire of Heretic Astartes. Because I know there are a lot of people teched for Heretic Astartes, which is basically the same game plan, where it's like a bunch of kind of slow idiots who just want to get into melee with you and basically are immune to regular attacks. And so you need like very special technology to kill them. And that kills both Dark Angels and Heretic Astartes. Although Dark Angels, I think, have more defense against them, because in Heretic Astartes, like if you're eating smites and mortal wounds and stuff, you can play Word Bearers, but other than that, you're just kind of taking it. Whereas Dark Angels can play Watched, so they have an auto deny. They can play Watchers in the Dark, so they have like blanket denies. They can play Litany of Faith, so they have a 5+, even when they're not playing Word Bearers. You know, pretty good. Can we see the ad mech list? We already took a look at the ad mech list, chat. You can scroll back in the video a little bit for that. It's kind of a cool MSU. Smotar GT, won by Heretic Astartes. We can take a look at some of the Heretic Astartes doing pretty well. I'm always also interested in looking at Azure Yanni. I think most people have moved to Ulthway, and that's what looks like what we've had here with the 4-in-1. This one bringing an Avatar of Cain, which is pretty sweet. Triple Rangers, triple Wraithlord, single Warlock Skyrunner, 10-man Swooping Hawks. Nice to see that unit still around, despite the fact it got nerfed, and no longer counts for a to the last, because that secondary is gone. 3 Shining Spears, 2 Wraith Seers, and a support weapon platform? Hold up. How many people are like creaming their pants about this list, chat? Avatar of Cain, triple Wraithlord, double Wraith Seer. Are you serious? This list is sick. And it's all protected by invulnerable saves. You have -1 damage everywhere. And you have the cast bonuses, so your like defensive spells go off better. And the Ulthway Warlord trait lets you... Is it that you roll an extra Strands of Fate dice? Is that right? Yeah, no, you keep 1 additional. Yeah, so you have... It's like this low MSU army, but you have a lot of control over your Strands of Fate, so you can keep the Wraith units alive for as long as possible. That's super sick, actually. Not to mention the fact that you have the Ulthway reroll on wound rolls, which means that you're already incentivized to play an MSU variety. So you might as well have an MSU of units that are good in melee and shooting, so you maximize the use of that wound reroll, that floating wound reroll. Plus, mortal wounds are a good way to get through damage ignore or damage reducing models. So they're all damage reducing. They all have an invulnerable save, and then on top of that, you have a 5+ against mortal wounds. So like, you're just compounding as the Wraithlord survivability. I like that synergy. That's very cool. That's a super cool list. I'm glad I clicked on that, chat. I wanted to see what direction the different Eldari lists are going, because it does feel like Eldari are very much... They're super strong, but we see a lot of Ynnari coming out of the woodwork right now, and a lot of people moved from Hail of Doom to Ulthway, and it's interesting to see that basically all 3 archetypes are kind of evenly played. But that list in particular is a very cool version. It's not like just billion D cannon weapons, and we're just trying to like get +1 to hit or whatever, and like re-rolling. We're walking across the table with Wraith Seers. That's so cool. I want to play that list. I wish they were faster. I'd play that list. They're a little slow, a little turgid, unfortunately. But we have a 5-0 with Night Lords. It does feel like Heretic Astartes are getting a little bit more play on a lot of their different sub factions. Oh, Nurgle Matt with the quick draw here. Pew! Against the bots. Thank you, sir. What a boss Nurgle Matt is. Cowboy over here, just capping those bots. But I think otherwise this is sort of a normal Heretic Astartes list. I have to say, I think while Heretic Astartes plays a bunch of different sub-factions, all of their lists typically look very similar. We have 2 Masters of Executions, which is kind of cute. 1 unit of Raptors, 1 Venom Crawler to buff the Master Possession, Warp Talons, a unit of Havocs with double Las Cannon, double Missile Launcher, and then Demon Prince, Swords of Discord, and Master Possession, triple Legionnaires, 1 unit of 10, which is a lot, as well as 1 unit of Terminators with Black Room of Damnation. It feels like you just pick whatever the brick du jour is for Heretic Astartes, and then you slant Black Room of Damnation on that, and then you like spin the wheel and say go, and That's kind of feels like how their lists are typically built. And then you take the normal HQs, which is some combination of Masters of Possession, Lords Discordant, Demon Princes, and like Abaddon, I guess. And then like and Dark Apostle. Sometimes there's Dark Apostle. So you have like 5 options in the HQ slot, or 4 options and then Abaddon. And then like, I don't know, 0 to 1 Master of Executions, 1 plus Venom Crawler, and then the rest is kind of Salted Taste. So, yeah, I don't know. Kind of normal. Normal Heretic Astartes fare. Oh no, I closed my... tournament page, chat. I apologize. Let me get back to it. Moving up, we did just talk about Ynnari. We can give them a look because they did wing Palm Springs Open by Dice Hammer. Chase Chappelle here with the Ynnari list. I do really like Ynnari. I think the playstyle of Ynnari is really cool. Just kind of like all in, super aggressive. Because the Incarn is such a problem if you're forced. If the Eldari player is forcing you to kill their models, the Incarn is like a massive problem because it becomes really difficult to pin down. And the fact that if they're forcing you to kill their models, their fight first works so well that they end up becoming kind of really difficult to engage profitably in melee. So it's 1 Farseer, Shadow Seer. There is a Warlock Seer Council Conclave. This is actually the exact list that I played against. Oh. Huh. It's a little bit different. There's Shroud Runners in this one. But this is almost exactly what I played against over the weekend. Double Rangers, 1 Cowboy Warrior. Yep. Shadow Seer, Incarn Farseer. Yep. Howling Banshee, Striking Scorpions. Single Warlock. In my opponent's list, it was a Warlock Skyrunner. There were no Shroud Runners in his list. But he did have the Falcon. He had he had triple support weapon, D-cannon support weapons. The Hemlock, the Void Raven. The Hemlock's there for the AoE, this big Witchfire AoE that does mortal wounds in a pulse. Because it's an aircraft, it can get up in your opponent's face and you can kind of double tap on mortal wounds. But of course they have to cast it. And I think the problem that my opponent was having was that obviously in order to get that spell off, you have to run into Shadow in the Warp and the -1 to cast. Plus 1,000 denies made it really difficult. I think he got off 1 time maybe. And then an auxiliary detachment with Beheroth. That's... All right, well, I played against this list, chat. So that's fun. It's interesting that I don't know how I feel about these planes, chat, by the way. Eldar planes, kind of easy to kill. I don't know. The Void Raven Bomber is very dicey. I wish there was a way I wish it was a little bit more consistent. I wish it was a normal bomber. I don't like its, like, exploding ability because it's so random. And it has the, like, you could potentially just immediately lose the game if it's, like, bombs all your important characters and they die. Or it could do nothing, and then your opponent loses the game because they spent 200 points on this, like, idiot who doesn't do anything. And that's a little bit frustrating. And that moves us on to this past weekend. So what do you see? Oh yeah, here's our X&1 with Iron Hands that we were talking about earlier when we were talking about Fushini's list. So that put Iron Hands, and I believe these were basically the only applicants, or the only players for Iron Hands, and that put Iron Hands at a 9-1 record for those 2 weekends, which is wild, right? Like there's this belief that Iron Hands, only Blood Angels or whatever can like compete at the upper echelon of Space Marine sub-factions, but Iron Hands just can, like their win rate gets so good. We also have an X&1 Blood Angels in here, to be fair. But, like, worst case scenario, I think those 2 sub-factions are on par with each other. And I think, in my opinion, Iron Hands dramatically beats out Blood Angels. Like, it's not even close. I think Blood Angels secondaries are probably stronger, but the fact that their game plan is so aggressive that they end up losing their army way earlier. This is very interesting. We did not take the Relic Contemptor. Chat, this guy X&1 with Iron Hands without the Vol Contemptor. What? Typically, the strategy is you take a Relic Contemptor Dreadnought. It costs you 3 CP, I think, because it's 1 for Martial Legacy. You have to buy it a Warlord trait, and you have to buy a March of the Ancients. And then the full combo is 4, because you also have a target protocol somewhere else. But oftentimes we have a target protocols anyway. But I guess not today. Bring a Primaris Chaplain on a bike. He's a Smash Chaplain. So Mantra of Strength, Benediction of Fury, Imperium Sword. So he's got the 3 damage weapon. He goes to 4 with +1 strength, +1 attack from the Imperium Sword. Huh. Alright, well. To each their own, I guess. I think every time I've seen that guy try to go into melee, he fails his mantra. I guess you could 1 CP autocast it, but it's a lot. And then we brought Tempered Helm as well. Alright. But typically the strategy is you take the Relic Contemptor, you give it March of the Ancients. It's below 9 wounds, or below 10 wounds, so it's lookout surable. So your opponent can't shoot at it. It gets Merciless Calculation. It's a stratagem or a Warlord trait to give additional attacks on hit rolls of 6. So it fires 16 Volkite shots plus 2 to 2d6 missiles, depending on what mode you're shooting. All of those explode. If there is a Tech Marine next to it, which we did take, you give it +1 to hit. So it's hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s if it's Methodical Destruction or in Devastator Doctrine because of the Iron Hand Super Doctrine. And then, so it should basically full convert. Its 6s explode, so it converts about 120% of its attacks. And then cannot be shot back. It's a ton of damage. It's wild. Plus, you can All Mercies weakness it so that its wound rolls explode as well, which gets kind of wild. But we didn't do that. Instead, we have double Devastator squads, but they're in 2 drop pods, which is interesting. So we can drop them separately instead of being consigned to a single drop location, which is very good. It's much more flexible than a single drop pod. But and 2 drop pods, I should mention as well, are pretty useful because holding the middle of the table is good for Iron Hands with a vehicle because they have Cold Fury. So, which is their secondary objective, which basically Oaths of Moment, but for vehicles only, which is pretty useful if you can just drop a drop pod in the center of the table every turn. So that does give you a little bit of a buff on your secondaries as well. But otherwise, it's triple Redemptor, Relic Terminator Squad, which is a good sync for defensive abilities. We don't have any Apothecaries or Librarians here, which can usually defend them. But the fact that you can give them a damage ignore roll for a CP in Iron Hands and then stack that on top of a 2+ save with Armor of Contempt is really strong. And we also have Canticle of Hate, so they might just also be a drop unit for the Chaplain to buff. And then we have the double Devastator squads, 1 with Grav, 1 with Melta, and a Gladiator Reaper. Gladiator Reaper, chat. Amazing. I love it. But winning that event was Dean Sinbeck with Chaos Space Marines this time. Creations of Bile. Love to see it. Winners of the Season 5 Invitational. Bunch of cultists in the troop slot. Big Terminator brick with Black Rune of Damnation. A Khorne Berserker unit. Amazing. Basically, playing in for the advance in charge in Creations of Bile. But then, I believe they can get to Strength 6, right? Are they Strength 6 base, so they get to Strength 7? This is a base profile of the chain axe there on these guys. Let's look. How about that new model for Khorne Berserkers, though, chat? Oh my god. Oh my god. So they are +1 strength for Mark of Khorne. Plus... Oh, they're just base strength 5. So they go to strength 6, go to strength 7 with Creations of Bile. But then they can advance in charge and then fight on death. So you could just kind of throw them at people, and then if they die, it doesn't matter. 2 bricks of 5 possessed. 1 unit of Chaos Bikers with the Mark of Khorne. 10 Chaos Bikers, is that right? Oh, what? with the black mace on the champion? Okay. It's mostly, I think, a delivery system for that champion, but that's pretty sick. A Raptor unit, 5 Raptors, and then Abaddon. Nice. That's pretty regular. We do have Dark Apostle, the Illusory Supplication, Demon Print in the HQ slot, and a Master Possession with Pact of Flesh to keep that Terminator brick going. And also, I guess I mean, all those combos work with the bikers as well. Paul, thoughts on Thousand Suns in the meta? I think they're pretty mediocre in the meta right now. The mortal wounds are really strong, and the shooting's pretty good against a lot of stuff, but the speed is a real problem. And especially since people are teching for these like big Terminator bricks and stuff, they just fall right into that. So there's a lot of things that just kill them, which is a little bit unfortunate. And then coming back this weekend, we already talked about the custodians list here, but I think for the most part, this is kind of, we'll probably see what is pretty representative of the current metagame. So we have some Tyranid X and 1s, not a lot of wins anymore, but I think that's pretty appropriate. It's time for some other factions to share the spotlight, but a lot of Necrons in the top here. 5-0 at Gigabytes, 5-0 at Heroes Retreat, and then a bunch of Harlequins in the top spot as well. Harlequins winning Bedburger Schönenkloppen. Nailed it. That was perfect. Any German speakers who want to criticize me, just get out of here. That was a perfect pronunciation, and no one can say anything about it. But we did have some outliers, obviously, and then Adeptus Sororitas at X and 1 as well. So probably like sort of in line with Tyranids. But I think that Harlequins, Necrons being like right in the top 2 there, pretty strong. Tyranids, Adeptus Sororitas also retaining their place up at X and 1. And then we see a little bit of a creep in here from some other factions. Thousand Suns getting a shout out, Asuryani as well. But that feels to me like kind of where the top 5-ish of the game is currently. But we had some outliers. I think the most interesting one, we had an Ultramarines of 4-1, and I think this he was in the finals if I remember correctly, and got streamed by Wargames Live. So go check out the finals of this is War in the Fort on Wargames Live, and you can see this playing into Harlequins, and it looks like they did a number to Harlequins, although they did end up losing the game. But it's G-Man, newly points reduced G-Man, Chief Librarian Tigurius, 1 Primaris Tech Marine with Seal of Oath, Master of the Forge on him as well. 4 troops choices? Chat, we brought extra troops? Crazy. 3 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, a Relic Contemptor, we paid the Martial Legacy tax this game, and triple Eliminator squads. Very nice. Both sniper rifles on the Eliminator squads. I wonder if there was a game plan here where we just Seal of Oath somebody's like main character if they placed it very aggressively, because Seal of Oath I believe triggers at the start of the first battle round, and then if you go first, you could just kill it with full rerolls. Pew! Get out of here. I would definitely fall into that trap, by the way. Take a look here. Yeah, start the first battle round before the first round begins. So you actually do know who's going first when you pick it. So you can pick something a little bit safer if you go second, but if you go first, you just kill whatever their front guy thing is. Plus, you can play really aggressively with all the forward deploy stuff and then run it away with rapid redeployment if you go second. That's really cute. I like that, chat. That's cool. Any orcs doing okay this weekend? I didn't see any, which is a little bit sad. Orcs are in a weird spot because it doesn't feel like we had one last weekend basically at a 4-1. But that was mostly all the orc representation. But orcs did, and this is like double kill rig. Double kill rig and Gazgul. There it is. Yeah, I think mostly the list it does well with orcs. But orcs are definitely in like a very mediocre place, which means they don't end up getting to top 5s very often, but X and 1 is a pretty common place for them. We also had I think I would be remiss if I didn't talk about it. We had an Astra Militarum in X and 1. Second place in Mork's Maritime Open. And this is a really classic Astra Militarum list. I looked at it before the stream. It was pretty cool to see. It's a gunnery expert's spotter details, so rerolling number of shots and then additional range on all their weapons. But that's so that you can turn on demolish the siege cannons on your tank commanders. So it's 2 tank commanders, like tricked out with las cannons, or multi-meltas, excuse me. So pretty good. A bunch of infantry squads with all the. They do have las cannons because those upgrades are free now, so we just have 1 million las cannons and multi-guns. A command squad, interestingly, for 25 points. You get 4 dudes. Pretty good. It's a pretty good plan. Pretty good return. 2 platoon commanders. Double basilisks, one with full payload. And then 3 more Leman Russ Demolishers and a Manticore, as well as 1 Chimera. I think it's pretty classic, right? Just a bunch of Leman Russ. It's 5 Leman Russ, 2 Basilisks, and a Manticore, so it's 8 tanks. You know, a bunch of infantry to protect them. Classic. Very nice. If your opponent can hide, it's a little bit sad. But obviously, the Leman Russ are like just fast enough. I posted on my Instagram of a Leman Russ player who was at my RTT this past weekend. I talked to him a little bit, and he said a lot of times focusing on the Leman Russ, they're so tanky now because they're 2+ armor save with armor of contempt. So they're basically, it's a Terminator profile. It's toughness 8. Which means you can play them kind of aggressively. If they get engaged, it sucks, but it's not like the end of the world if you have a lot of them, because one of them falls back and everyone else shoots at whatever, engage them. But they are just fast enough that they can get around the sides of terrain, and because you're not quite as worried about like staying in auras and stuff as you would be for an infantry unit, they can kind of play independently. And if you just drop a bunch of strats on them when they go in, 1 tank commander with or 1 Leman Russ with demolishers can do a bunch of damage. So 5 Leman Russ just sort of spread around the deployment, like the front line of the deployment zone, so that if you go first or if you have an opportunity, you can try kind of get around those lines of sight. Does make it a lot better to play the Ashen Militarum gun line. YouTube is a cesspool of bots right now. Yeah, for sure. It's so bad. It's really bad. They need to do something about the bots on YouTube. Like even on Twitch, we don't get this problem. It's like, it's crazy. But YouTube, you know, just doing the thing. Just a million bots. I know we did talk about Mark Perry a little bit. This is at discountgamesinc.com/tournaments chat. We use it every week. There you go. Put it in the chat for everyone. Matthew Nurgle announced that he liked this list as Emperor's Children, so a little bit more aggressive. There's a real contention between Emperor's Children and Creations of Bile. Which one's better? I like Creations of Bile, but maybe I'm biased because I spent like an entire month watching Creations of Bile run over people. But that said, full strikes first on Emperor's Children stuff is pretty good. And then the Honor the Prince versus Advance and Charge is like kind of similar. So I don't know. It's 1 Noise Marine squad in a Dreadclaw, 1 Helldrake, and then Mortarion, Abaddon, and Bellicor. And is this a patrol detachment? Hold on. What? This is a Chaos Undivided patrol detachment? I guess you can do that, right? Because they all share all the keywords. This is a very Mark Perry list, chat, for sure. Mortarion, Bellicor, and Abaddon. Where's Magnus at? It's too bad that guy sucks now. Otherwise, you get Magnus in here. Plus, turn 1 drop from the Dreadclaws. That's pretty good. So the Dreadclaw can drop the Noise Marines down. When you drop them in half range, so they get the buff on their sonic weapons, and then your opponent has to shoot that squad and kill them. Ah, they're back. They're back, chat. And then as you do, that just pulls focus from Mortarion and Bellicor. And there's not a lot of armies that can deal with Mortarion and Bellicor before Abaddon gets there. And that man will table some armies by himself. He's so strong. We also have a Foul Blight spawn. With Revolting Stench Fans. Can we buy Revolting Stench Fans? In an undivided detachment? Is that legal? How do you... Chaos Soup lists are so convoluted, chat. I guess you have the strats open because you have an actual Death Guard detachment over here in Mortarion's detachment. So that probably unlocks the stratagems, I would imagine. And then they're targetable on the guys. Even though you'll lose a bunch of sub-faction abilities. Not that you really get too many in Death Guard anyway. And the guys that are not inside the Death Guard proper detachment, they can still targetable by stratagems. Yeah. So you exclude auxiliary support, super heavy, and fortification, but this is a supreme command, so it's okay. Okay, yeah. All right, that seems on the up and up. Wild. That's cool. That's sick, chat. Very cool. All right. Yeah, I love that list. I want the metagame to be more or less like that. Just big stompy monsters. Let's have a big smash. And just hope for the best. Give some shout outs here at the end here. We got Dutes and then 4-1, X-1. Dutes was in the Invitational and plays all literally like every day in the Discord. So if you want to watch Dutes play his Adeptus Sororitas, he's actually playing tomorrow, by the way, on stream. He's playing, I think he's playing Sororitas on stream. I'd have to go double check what the matchup is, but I'm streaming him 9 p.m. US Eastern Time on Twitch. So speaking of Dutes, if you want to go hang out with, if you want to go watch him play, you can do that. I don't know if there's any other community members in our top X here. I'm sure there are, and I'm missing them. Cullen, CBRN84, has commentated with me on stream quite a bit. He's played on stream here, and is a community member as well. And I know Chris Kinnair, who is in the Season 2 Invitational, 6-0 with Necrons, Beast in the Midlands. Not to mention that we have good old Fucini with the top X here. So a lot of Tactical Tortoise representation on this on these undefeated records, which I'm pretty appreciative of. Is it okay if you start spamming my Twitch with adult sites so they taste their own medicine? Oh, if you like go to the adult sites and spam my Twitch, yes, do that. Absolutely do that for sure. Pascal, 100%. I think that's a perfect solution. All right, chat. So I think that's mostly it. Definitely some rough edges in the game to smooth over. Necrons kind of showing their strength. It's weird that the Necron win rate continues to not be amazing, despite the fact that Necrons are so strong. Like, they're clearly really good, but I think you have to have your head screwed on correctly to play them well. And a lot of it's because they're such a scoring-heavy faction, whereas a lot of people spend a lot of their time studying damage output, right? Like, I mean, and to be honest, you know, that's something that we talk about in 40k a ton, is like, what are correct profile matchups, how to allocate your attacks, think about your profiles, take the most efficient damage per point. But Necrons don't care as much about that. They still want to be able to kill what they need to. But the fact that so much of their game plan is based on like hardcore objective control, that I think it's harder to play than people give it credit for. And I have watched a lot of Necron armies, like, you know, they'll mispick secondaries, they'll take like ancient machineries in a game they weren't supposed to, or and they end up cutting themselves like just enough points that they lose. I literally in the Invitational Finals, we saw Necrons lose control of a primary objective and almost immediately lose the game. And I think that kind of goes to show you that Necrons are harder to play than they should be, or than they're expected to be. But still, in my opinion, still the best faction in the game, or at least top 3. Adeptus Sororitas, not too many wins with Adeptus Sororitas the last couple weeks, but we did see this massive representation of Harlequins, which I think is makes a ton of sense. Harlequins are super duper good. But Tyranids on the down low now, which is good. People can stop complaining about me playing Tyranids. I played, there were, I think, 21 people at my RTT over the weekend. There was one Tyranid player who was borrowing his army. He didn't normally play Tyranids, but he wasn't able to get his army before the event. So he was borrowing a Tyranid army, and then there was me, and that was the only Tyranid representation. Going from a couple weeks ago when I would show up to an event, and there were like 5 or 6 Tyranid players. Pretty wild. But anyway, chat, I think that's all I have to talk about for today on the stream. Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this one. We're going to have Fucini on next time. We're going to talk about Space Marines. We'll probably, maybe we'll do a little Space Marine tier list. How's that sound, chat? Because he is a Space Marine extraordinaire. We'll talk about Space Marine sub-factions. We'll do a little bit of list breakdown. Maybe we'll talk about Fucini's Iron Hands list, although I do have a whole video about that. It's like 40 minutes long. It's awesome. I'm super excited about it. And if anybody has any requests for people that they would like to hear on the live stream show, as I'm trying to get back into getting more interviewees on, then let me know, because throw those down in the comments, because I think it would be cool. Anyway, chat, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Remember to keep it classy. Have happy wargaming. Don't forget to check out Snot Goblin Gaming's Kickstarter. I know they're funded at this point. I guess we can take a quick look at their In the last hour, how well have they done? They're up to about 16 grand. Fucking awesome. 94 backers. I think they were at 90 at the start, so they got 4 more backers. Go check them out. I'll throw a link in the pinned comments, actually, just because I might as well. And have a good one. Oh, don't forget to sign up for the GT that's ending this Thursday on the TacticalTortoise Discord. Go check it out over there. It's called the T5S2 August GT. It has its own channel and everything. Go in there, register, get points, get prizes. It's friggin' sweet.